All right. Welcome, everybody, to today's Apprenticeship Illinois webinar. I'll be your moderator and technical support. If you have any questions or you have any technical difficulties, go ahead and put them in the chat and I can help you out with that. We will have Q&A portions throughout the presentation, but if you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat as well, and we will make sure that those get to the presenters. Um, Feel free to raise your hand if you've got any questions, but I would appreciate if you would wait until the Q&A portion to raise your hand, and we will. You have the power to unmute yourself, so be wary of that. Make sure that your microphone is off while presenters are presenting. Make sure that your camera is off while the presenters are presenting, or at least be wary of what is on camera. So this webinar will also be offering closed captioning for accessibility. Feel free to turn that on. That is now enabled. We will be recording this webinar and it will be available on apprenticeshipillinois.com. We will send an email out to everybody who registered for the webinar once that is up on Apprenticeship Illinois, and with the link for you to watch it and for you to share it out. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Jen Foyle.
Thank you, Antonio. Can you hear me, Antonio?
Yes, and your screen looks
Perfect.
good too.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for everyone for joining us. I'm joined with my colleagues, John Barr, Ann Brogdon, Chase Martin from DCO, and then, of course, Antonio from ISU, and as well as Nate Carlson and Ivy Hood from NIU. We're all here to help support this effort, and we're all here as resources for you. So as Antonio said, we are recording this, and the landing page is being developed right now. And as soon as it's developed, hopefully by late this afternoon or early tomorrow morning, then Antonio can email you the recording as well as the landing page information. But we're here to talk about the program year 2026 Apprenticeship Illinois Expansion Grant Funds for Apprenticeship Specialists. So this is under the State of Illinois' WIOA Notice 25-NOT-02. Also, feel free to put things in the chat, and we will have Q&A at the end. For a background, for those who don't know, this is our fourth round of funding through the State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula Funds. So that spells out SAFE. So if you hear us say the word SAFE, it's State Apprenticeship Expansion Formula from the U.S. Department of Labor. So the first year we got 1.3 million. The next 2 years we got 1.6 million. And this year we're getting 2.7 million, but you will notice that it's a larger period of performance though for this year. So with this greater amount of money, we're also anticipating greater amounts of grants that we distribute around the range of 100K to 400K based on quality, activities, and potential impact. We believe that we're gonna set the anticipated period of performance that we set for the initial application is from July 1st of this year through June 30th of 2028. So when DOL released this, they released it under TEGL 0925. So if you want to look that up, feel free to do so. They put 3 specific requirements. So the next 3 slides is kind of going over the requirements that DOL is requiring. The first one is state expansion goals. So it says that states must establish a statewide expansion goal for the total number of active apprentices by industry, sector, and occupation. I believe this goes towards what they're talking about when they've set this goal for themselves, for the nation, to have 1 million apprentices. In the past, we haven't asked for the apprenticeship specialists, and you'll also notice in the application, we haven't asked for you to put a number of active apprentices that you may actually help support through these grant funds. So we're going to have to figure out those projections together. This is going to be a collaborative process. Now, we will have to submit our application to DOL with an estimated number, and you'll just have to trust DCO that we'll put in a reasonable amount and figure out how we work to get to that amount, and then that amount may change. So we'll work together on that. Excuse me. Also, we're asking that local applicants commit to developing a strategy, and we're going to talk about this again later, that will result in at least 10% of the WIOA Title B formula expenditures to be going towards apprenticeship and work-based learning activities by June 30th, 2029. This again is a signal from the USDOL that we're getting, and we'll go through this later as well. We'll talk about it again. The second requirement that was under TEGL 0925 is we've got to support employers and registered apprentices in targeted industries. So you'll see in this notice that we're asking you, and in the application itself, we're asking you to identify at least 2 priority sectors that you're going to work towards. And this should align with your regional plans. So you should have sectors that are identified in your regional plans, and we're asking that you choose some of those that you are going to really focus on with the apprenticeship specialists. And we ask that you see this, like the local applicants must concentrate at least 75% of SAFE grant funds on expanding apprenticeships in these industries. So we still understand that you're going to have other employers within your region that may not fit into those industries that want to start programs, and absolutely we ask that you help them. But we want you to use your time towards those priority sectors and have a sector strategy when expanding work-based learning and apprenticeship. The third requirement that DOL has in the TEGL is that we leverage resources. So the states, each of the states that receive this funding have to commit to leveraging at least 50% of formula allocation. And remember, I told you we got 2.7 million, so we have to leverage 50% of that. So we're asking that the local applicants will be required to include leverage cost in the grant application budget narrative. Notice that we're not putting this in the budget template itself, but we ask that you put this in the budget narrative of how you're going to leverage different costs. So we ask that you leverage, existing public workforce and education system funding streams such as WIOA, Perkins, CTE, and other relevant funding sources. And just to let you know, it's not about the money. We're really interested in where you're going strategically. So, in a perfect world, you would be leveraging 3 or 4-fold of what you're getting. But it's really, again, not about the money. It's about where you are headed strategically. So program design. So some things are just going to stay the same. So for those who have had these funds before for an apprenticeship specialist, some things are not going to change. So we'll just go over things that haven't changed. They'll still stay the same. We still have the workforce board's work-based learning and apprenticeship committee. We're an OA state, meaning we do not have a state apprenticeship agency. So they really are our guiding, committee for the state level and bringing all different partners together. So on that committee, all 4 core WIOA partners are represented. Community colleges are represented, community-based organizations, union, employers. So we have a nice mix, and they really are a guiding force for the state on where we go with work-based learning and apprenticeship. So that's not going away. We still have the Apprenticeship Illinois framework. This framework was created by the committee back in 2018. And this is where we say that if we get state funding or federal funding, and we really want to expand apprenticeship and scale it, that we need to put money towards specialists, apprenticeship specialists, and high impact intermediaries. So that's what we're doing still. Still, the apprenticeship specialist will be a regional subject matter expert and embedded within business services. So you have that employer engagement. We're still using the state of Illinois framework for integrated business services as a guide to how we work with other partners and within our region. And you're still a no-cost concierge service to employers and other sponsors to set up programs from concept to implementation. So that's all the same. As part of getting the first round of SAFE funds, and then every year since, we've had to update it, the state of Illinois had to create a 5-year apprenticeship expansion plan. So we still have that plan that was with the help of the Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship Committee. These are our 4 goals, and this isn't going away. That's still part of it. And this will be on that landing page as well. If you haven't seen the plan lately, we're going to have a link to it there as well. But goal 1, coordinate and expand services to workers and career seekers. We do that by coordinating and expanding services to employers. We coordinate and expand services to, all of our different partners that are within workforce and economic development and education. And then goal 4 is just planning and system development. So we're all in this together with creating this work-based learning and apprenticeship ecosystem. And what will not go away is that we will still continue to use Illinois WorkNet to track all of our work that we're doing and to look at our outcomes. And we'll still submit quarterly reports. We, as the state, has to submit quarterly reports to DOL. We learn what's going on through your quarterly reports and for what you put into Illinois WorkNet. And be prepared to present to the IWIB's Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship Committee when needed. We've had quite a few different specialists present to them, and it helps keep them up to date of like, we haven't gone away, your vision is still being implemented, and it's actually evolving. So here's where the changes are. So program design, what's new and why it matters. So we've had 3 years of learning, building on that foundation, and we have some new requirements. The first one is that the specialist is a sector strategist and a career pathway architect. I encourage all of you, and this will be on the landing page as well, but to look at Strata Education Foundation's framework for effective employer intermediaries. It's as if they took what the state of Illinois has been doing and intends to do with apprenticeship specialists, and they put it in a great document that really spells out what you're doing or should be doing as a specialist if you're not a specialist currently. But they call it intermediary. So don't get caught up on the language they use, but this is a great resource to see what we've always been doing and what we intend to keep doing and evolving. I told you that we have a sector focus here, so I encourage you to check out the U.S. Department of Labor's sector strategies framework. And then one of the sector strategies frameworks is talent pipeline management framework from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundations, which many of you I know have been trained in and even certified in. So that's always a resource for you with your sector strategy. We also want you to align each of your local regional, what you're doing with your local regional plans. And then you'll see too, when we're talking about how we want to get to that 10% of WIOA allocations, how are you going to get that into your plan by the end of the 3 years? I'm going to turn it over to Ann Brogdon, our work-based learning program manager.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Another element that is new in emphasis this year is a clear connection between CTE education and employment. So we are asking that applications demonstrate that clear understanding of the local education landscape in your region, what CTE looks like, and how you can make connections beyond the classroom. We're looking for a tangible plan for taking participants from CTE and dual enrollment experiences through to the pre-apprenticeship, the registered apprenticeship, and eventually a long-term career in that industry sector. And we're looking for a clear plan for working with school districts and local employers to align CTE curriculum to those in-demand careers and create those employment pipelines. So that can include influencing the teaching of skills and competencies required in occupation, making those connections between industry and what's actually being taught in our classrooms. And then finally, we want there to be a focus on career clusters and cross-cutting occupations. That would include IT, marketing, operations, human resources, which exist across all industries. And I know that our wheel here is very small. This is expected to be implemented in the 27-28 school year, and I'll drop in the chat a link where you can see it and read it in all of its detail. So this is going to be a big emphasis going forward for these grants.
Thank you, Ann. And like Ann said, this was a CTE, the connection of to CTE with work-based learning and apprenticeship was called out in the TEGL that the USDOL released. And thank you, Anne, for putting that in the chat, but also this will be on the landing page as well as another document with, I believe, a cross-cutting occupations framework. All right, so some more program requirements. We're asking that the apprenticeship specialists have protected time. So we understand that a lot of business services, you do a lot of other things and you have a lot of competing agendas and some short-term transactional things that you work on. But we also understand that the apprenticeship specialists that have done really well have had a lot of dedicated time to apprenticeship and work-based learning specifically. And that they also had a great handle on what registered apprenticeship program model is. So when you see RAP, that's registered apprenticeship program, about all the different components such as the OJT, RTIs, which is related training instruction or supplemental education, how to register programs within DOL. They understood the wage progressions, and they really understand, the 3 C's that Nate has come up and with, that kind of took everything from the registered apprenticeship model and Nate put it into 3 C's. That's on apprenticeshipillinois.com. But these apprenticeship specialists that have done well have really understood. They understood the model and how it fits into existing business operations. So how it could fit into what businesses are already doing. So that's something we're asking for from the specialists. You must also have a working knowledge of your regional CTE programs, your community colleges and their programs, and programs that could be used towards apprenticeship programs if they're not already, and then also other training providers in your area. We ask that the apprenticeship specialists also be fluent in the full work-based learning spectrum, so that understand that work-based learning is can be an on-ramp to registered apprenticeship programs. So there'll be existing work-based learning programs that could be turned into registered apprenticeship programs. Or maybe that's where they want to start and not start exactly with or immediately with a registered apprenticeship program. So you understand that whole spectrum and what works best for the different clients. And if your apprenticeship specialist is not already hired, we need you to convince us that you have a great plan of how this person is going to be hired within a reasonable timeline and ready to hit the ground running, and then how you plan to cover that gap when that specialist is not in place yet. So we ask that you attach a job description and give us some detail about that. Excuse me. Here we're back at the focused sector strategy. So here again, we're asking that you're going to identify, and you'll see what we're going to go through the work plan. You'll see that we want you to identify 2 priority sectors. This may change. You may, once we get it, because we're going to have some different partner meetings and talk about sector strategies and really kind of refine that. And perhaps you have told us that you're going to focus, like, let's just say manufacturing and IT, but then you realize later, well, now with what you really understand about your region and your regional plan, it should be something else. That's okay. But what you need to give us somewhere to start with. So which priority sectors are you going to focus on, and how does that align with your regional labor market demand? Within that also, just to get the wheels moving, we're asking that what are 2 occupations per priority sector that you think that you could work on immediately. So these are they've got to appear on the in-demand list or reflect some kind of documented employer hiring difficulty. So just show some kind of evidence of why you're focusing on these 2 different occupations per sector. Then we're also going to ask, which 2 to 3 specific employers per sector do you think you can engage with these occupations and start the apprenticeship or work-based learning programs? Additionally, we're going to ask, who will be the related training instruction provider or the supplemental education? What are some existing CTE programs, community colleges, or other training providers that could fit into this model, that could provide the supplemental education, for the occupation for these manufacturers, for these industries. And again, we want this to align to the Chapter 3 of your regional and local workforce plan. And again, we say 75% of the time because we know that you will be approached by, let's say you said IT and manufacturing, but yet you have someone from the insurance business that wants you to help. Well, absolutely, you can help them. We're just asking that you have that sector strategy, that sector focus for the majority of your time. Another thing that we found of the really successful apprenticeship specialists in the past few years is that they've had committed implementation partners. So they had some great partners who provided the education piece, the RTI, related training and instruction, and that was part of the program design. They didn't like contact them later. They were part of like a partner from the beginning. They were at the table. And so we ask that you have committed implementation partners. Another successful indicator for apprenticeship specialists is that they had some kind of employer entry points, whether it was an industry association, some kind of sector collaborative, a great chamber in their region. But just cold outreach here and there, it just takes so much more time, and it's not as scalable or as impactful. And so we're going to ask that you show us what your employer entry points are. And then tell us what those roles are of the partners that you put in there. And then again, we want you to just, tell us really, we've really pushed over the past few years the integrated business services team idea, concept, the model, and just give us an idea, like honestly, where are you starting from? How is that working in your region? Are you all kind of coordinated or not? And then what you're going to do to help that coordination. And, if you look back in our past ones, each IBS team kind of looks different. So you may have different partners, then not every region is exactly the same, and that's okay. We just want to know what your region is. Another program requirement is employer engagement, obviously. So that was one of the reasons that the Work-Based Learning and Apprenticeship Committee came up with that framework, the Apprenticeship Illinois Expansion Framework, is because we realize employers are the bottleneck. This is the whole reason you all exist, is to help, get past that bottleneck, because we don't have apprenticeships and we don't have work-based learning if we don't have employers. This is the framework, kind of, the overarching framework for the Strata Education Foundation's framework for effective employer intermediaries. Again, I highly recommend that you go and read this, but the 5 key areas are employer engagement, you're building that trust, it is relationships. Solutions design, you're helping them with their solutions, helping them find their right partners. Solutions brokering, implementation support, so you don't just leave them after, like, okay, good luck, here's what you need to do. You help them support the implementation, and then the administrative support. So Nate has given tons of TA sessions on how to use Standards Builder, how to register programs within the programs within Standards Builder. And so, we ask that you continue to do that. Do that administrative support. What we're trying to do is for you all to help the employers hit that easy button. Okay, another requirement is that work-based learning to registered apprenticeship program pipeline. So again, like I said before, work-based learning can be an on-ramp for registered apprenticeships. Also, sometimes employers are not ready just to dive right in. They need kind of like a proof of concept. So we're asking that you start mapping out existing work-based learning activities that's across your region, and then different partners that are in that space, and describe how it can be converted into a RAP exploration, or even into a RAP, a registered apprenticeship program. We want you to think about what the conversion goals can be. Some of this is just low-hanging fruit, because some of them already have programs that seem very similar to a registered apprenticeship. You just plug in the pieces and help them put that model together. And then also we ask that you describe how are you going to bring in your education partners for that program design, and that they're not just notified after the employer commits to this, they're part of the design itself. Let's see. Here, we wanted to provide a couple of examples for work-based learning to registered apprenticeship pipeline. So I know there's a bunch of words on here, but this is an example from manufacturing. It's like if you had an incumbent worker in a manufacturing plant and you want to upskill them. So there's a regional manufacturer has several machinist level 1 employees who are ready to advance, but there's no formal pathway. So the apprenticeship specialist works with that employer to use incumbent worker training funds to upskill them into a machinist level 2 role. But you can structure that into a registered apprenticeship program. So you can use the IWT funding towards and help them create a very structured pathway in the form of a registered apprenticeship. You can work with your local community college that's providing the related training instruction. And then you can help them backfill those machinist ones by creating another apprenticeship program that helps bring in people into machinist level 1. And so this could then you could be bringing in high school students that are graduating from CTE programs and all. So you're working with one employer and you're actually producing 2 registered apprenticeship programs. So this is just one example of what we're saying when we say a pipeline to work-based learning to apprenticeship. Another example, this is a youth example, and it says youth registered apprenticeship program, and DOL does not differentiate between a registered apprenticeship, whether it's they don't differentiate between youth or adults, but just if you're trying to like target youth and bring them into a registered apprenticeship program. So here's an example with healthcare. So you have high school CTE program that has health sciences pathway that they're training people for CNA positions. So once they graduate or they get 18 years old and they take the certification exam and they pass, then they can start working as a CNA as they're working in a registered apprenticeship program towards an LPN or an RN. So we're taking people who have already had training and this work-based learning experience that's now leading to another registered apprenticeship program. And this way we can bring youth what they're learning in their CTE programs and working with employers who are having a hard time filling specific positions, and we're connecting them all. So here we're all connectors with employers, with high schools, and with participants. All right, so here is another program requirement. So we're asking you to put together a 3-year strategy to align WIOA investments in 2 apprenticeships. So this is, it's a brand new requirement. You're going to create a strategic plan that progressively increases the work-based learning and apprenticeship over 3 years. The target is for 10% of your WIOA funds to be directed towards work-based learning and apprenticeship related activities by the end of 2028. We're not requiring with the application a full developed plan, but we are going to ask that you put in some targets. And we'll talk about the full developed plan later. But we're also asking that you name some specific actions that will help you get an increased investment. And then we need leadership commitment that's required. So the LWIA director must describe how this will be tracked and reviewed at the board level. Oh, and yes, we said at least 10%. And John Barr, would you like to say anything else about this?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks, everybody. And so, as the notice indicates, there's not going to be like a penalty. We certainly are going to track it. As we analyze the data across, the last 6 completed program years of WIOA funding. We found a very slow increase in work-based training expenditures. And on average, actually, as we look at it, if you look at the data, there were actually a couple of years where you look at like I guess actually the full completed years of PY21, we actually hit above 10%. So like we were at, so in adult and dislocated worker, we were down, about 7%. Then we bumped up above the 10 or 11%. Then we dipped below 8 or 9. So like it's kind of rocky and it's like it's hovering around that 10. So we want to see some like the slide says some directional movement around that, and we more of a steady, kind of an upward slant, if you will. And again, this is we think it's very modest, but we understand that this goal is going to be customized as well to your local area. And we also know that the data that we're looking at is an aggregate. We didn't dig into the local area expenditures. Um, so we know that some areas are blowing it out of the water, as far as hitting that, hitting the cliff, or hitting the, going up the mountain there, as far as those expenditures, and then others are flat or kind of wobbling. So that's kind of our intent, is to really integrate apprenticeships and work-based learning, and know that it's not just apprenticeships, it's work-based learning, that we're looking at. But we know that the federal level, the state level, is a continued area of importance, and everything that we're hearing is, as well as all know, the importance of the data proving the activities that you're working on, working to make happen. And so we need to make sure that we're using that data and using those data points to show that progressive movement.
And John, while you're talking about this, someone put in the chat, with using at least 10% of all WIOA funds,
Yep.
Do the apprentices have to meet WIOA eligibility then?
Yep. So when we're talking about, this is part of a larger strategy, right? So we are incorporating apprenticeships into the state's work-based learning strategies. And so that's what the 10% planning activities are going to speak to. When we talk about related activities, we will define that. We'll define that with you as we go through the planning process. But generally speaking, if you look at your current formula funding for those that are, in that space, you're looking primarily at OJTs. You're looking at internships, and then also there is the apprenticeship budget line. So at a minimum, those are lines that we'll look at to target, but there may be other budget lines that we customize, or we work with you to customize, to look at and track those data points. For some cases, it may be appropriate to look at your incumbent worker training line if you incorporate those strategies that Jen just kind of identified, and kind of that upskill, back skill type of model. So yes, David, it does. Yeah, I mean, and if you're using it for the sake of apprenticeship and that work-based learning, right? So if it's you're just upskilling, garden variety incumbent worker, no, I mean that's just, you're and that's good. It's not a bad thing, right? We're all for making the workers more productive, um, but we want to see how you utilize that as a strategy. So it really will be customized, and that's really the point of this, is that we can look at the data at a state level, but how are you going to move the needle at a local and regional level?
And Terrence, you asked, when's the strategic plan due? We're gonna ask for it to be completed, at least a draft, by the end of the first quarter of the grant. But we're going to actually, and we'll get to that, we're going to work together on that because this is new for everybody. Anything else, John?
I think that's it for now. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, let's get on to the application information. So like I said before, funding range could be 100 to 400K. We have a 24-month period of performance. Eligible applicants are LWIAs or core WIOA partners. That could include community colleges. So, but if they're not a core, if you're not an LWIA, you need designation from your local Workforce Innovation Board. And we do have a template for you guys to use, as a designation letter. You must work with regional partners. Consideration is given to quality and impact versus the number of specialists. So although we want every region to have a specialist, we want to ensure everyone's committed to the quality and the impact. And you got to use the funds to support apprenticeship expansion activities. Requests must be reasonable, necessary, and directly related to the notice. Checklist. So, all your normal stuff, uniform grant application, mandatory disclosure, conflict of interest, the formatted technical proposal, which I'll show you here in a minute, the work plan, I'll show you that as well. We've got just your normal uniform budget template. And then we've got the IWIB designation letter sample for you. We're asking for the specialist resume for the person that you've named. If you don't have the resume, if you don't have a specialist in place, then we're asking you to do the job description and like the hiring plan, and then also partner commitment letters. So the technical proposal has 8 different sections. In the past we've made them super simple. We still try to make it simple. So I don't want to scare you guys off. I'm going to show you here just in a minute. So we have the 8 different sections. Before I start sharing other things, I'm just going to show you that the work plan has 7 different tabs, and then there's the uniform budget. So let me stop sharing here and share another screen here. Here we go. All right. Can everybody see the formatted technical application?
It looks good.
Okay, thank you. Anyone? Bueller? Okay, so here we have the technical application. So I told you how we had 8 sections, but we also don't want you to have to do 20 pages worth of an application. So we're actually asking for as you notice here, some very specific things, but give us a 500 words max. So we have the organizational commitment and specialist designation. And again, each section has a max of how many words, a specialist qualifications and regional knowledge. And then again, if you don't have a specialist in place, here's what you'll do instead. Your sector strategy. So the priority industry sectors, can you give us a description of these, the occupations and the employers? And then can you give us a description of the education and training partner alignment? So again, we have a 500 words max and a 300 words max there. Implementation partners and regional coordination. So this is where, do you have an existing integrated business services team? And, kind of give us the health of that and what you're doing there. Employer engagement approach and methodology. We ask that you give us a description here, 400 words max. Your work-based learning strategy. Describe your current work-based learning activity in your region. In the priority sectors that you're working with, and give us a 400 words max there. You'll see and we'll talk about this later, is that, within that first quarter of your grant, we have several things that we want. So we didn't want to ask for too much for this application because it's a kind of a short turnaround. But within the first 90 days, there are, let's say, 5 different things that we're asking for. But again, we're going to develop these together as a partner. And then the budget narrative. And remember, here in the budget narrative, please tell us how you're leveraging your funds as well. Looks like we have quite a few Let's see. Okay, there we go. Thanks, everybody. I was looking at the chat there. All right. The work plan. The work plan is always, I think we started last year, maybe the year before. We put it in an Excel spreadsheet so we have different tabs for each one. Please, in your summary, can you give us a concise summary? So we have to give summaries up to the director's office of everyone who is funded. And so this would be very helpful if you kind of tell us right away who the sectors are, and the occupations and the employers you're targeting, who your specialist is, things of that nature. So give us a really good little project summary there. As always, we ask for just your planned activity and outcomes. So this is what you think you'll be doing here. And so you'll go in here and put a number for the number of new registered apprenticeship programs you plan to develop. So this is a plan. Staffing and partnerships. So this is, the lead applicant personnel information, but then tell us about your integrated business services team members, people in your region, and you can totally add if you want here, but let us know what it looks like and who all they're planned to be on the team or will be on your team within your region of who you're working with, your partners. Let's see. Tab 4 is sector strategy. I put an example in here. So let's say your two sectors are healthcare and manufacturing. Well, but then also so you put the sectors that you're targeting, and then you put the occupations that you're targeting within those sectors. And again, this is projected right now, but based on what your regional plans are and what you know from the labor market demand. You notice I put some cross-cutting occupations in here. So IT can be a sector, but it also can be a cross-cutting occupation. And then the target employers that you think you'll go after in your region to talk to and work with, and then also your training and education partners as well. So that's your sector strategy tab. Your projected 3-year WIOA investment alignment. This isn't your strategic plan that we're asking. That comes at the end of the first quarter of the grant period. This is just giving us what's your baseline right now, and then what's your projected target will be over over these years. And then just some key actions that you plan to do to get to that target. Employer engagement. Kind of describe to us your employer engagement methodology, and then also kind of like your pipeline stages. Feel free to adapt this as needed, but how are you going to get the work-based learning to apprenticeship pipeline? And so how many projected employers do you think you'll have? And you notice that we just put 1 year, even though this is a 2-year grant, but we want you to start thinking about what your methodology will be, and then that pipeline, what it kind of looks like. Oops. And finally, the implementation plan. This is the same as it's been over the past several years. The activity, the timeline, staff responsible, and then deliverables, accomplishments, or milestones. So this, since it's a 2-year, we're looking for 2 years worth of implementation. And feel free on any of these to add more rows as needed. I see there was a question in the chat. Available for download as a Word document. Yes, it is, David Vaughn. It's going to be there as a Word document for you. And let me ask though that if when you're adding more, you have all of that, if it goes into another page and you save it as a PDF and then you notice it's not readable, we won't be able to read everything you put there. So ensure that you save it correctly and you can send it as a work or as a PDF. This is Michelle.
We want the Excel file. We don't want the PDF.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was for I was answering. Yes. Thank you, John. When it comes to the formatted technical application, we want, it could be a PDF, but make sure we can read it, because when this is expanded, it might fall somewhere and the PDF may not catch it.
Yeah, but the project work plan, we want to make sure we have that, because that will live with your grant, and we want to make sure that that's an Excel file.
Absolutely. Thank you there.
Thanks.
Yes, and it's a 2-year. This is a 2-year period. I see, Michelle, For this particular one, it's always been 1 year in the past. This now funding is for 2 years. Here's a sample IWIB designation letter that you all could use if it's a community college or one of our other core WIOA partners coming in for this rather than the local workforce area. Here's the budget. John, do you want to say anything about the budget? I mean, I believe this is just what the normal budget has been.
Yeah, budget straightforward, uniform budget template. If anybody has any questions about it, let us know. I would note that we didn't have a slide in there about it, but there is included in this award the employer incentives, and that that is encouraged to continue and even expand out. If you want to do the employer incentives, you have to have a policy for that, and so we would need to make sure we have that and review it, make sure it's reasonable and all of that. Interesting in this award, there are no limits to that amount. Previous DOL awards, I believe it was capped at around 20%, although we never had more than 20% requested. So just know, again, this is a newer, or this is just it's just interesting that they didn't put a cap there. So leave it at that.
Yes, and I totally forgot to put a slide in there, but yes, employer incentives that's always been some people have used those, and it's been a great entry point into employers. Thank you, John. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chase to talk about fiscal management monitoring reporting.
Yeah, sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of go over this slide, and I mean, all this information is the same as all grants in the past. Nothing's changed. This program is going to be funded by USDOL Apprenticeship USA grants. The grant funding provided is on a reimbursement basis, and just like the other grants in the past, we're anticipating July 1st start date where you can backdate your costs all the way back to July 1st. That's when the grant will start, and by the time we get grant set up and everything, like as you know, it takes some time, but you can always go back to July 1st for your reimbursement. The cost must be associated with allowable apprenticeship expansion activities. The cost must be documented in accordance with the 2 CFR Part 200. The grant awards are subject to monitoring by DCO and also USDOL, and the grantees must submit their standard
That's
program
good.
and fiscal reports.
Thank you, Chase.
Yep.
Okay, now here's that we were first talking about maybe having this do with the application. We're like, this is way too much. But this is something that we're asking to be delivered within the first quarter of the grant period. So the 3-year plan to align WIOA investments with work-based learning and apprenticeships. We're asking for a regional work-based learning and CTE inventory. So like what is in your region of work-based learning and CTE? The activity and the education partners in the priority sectors. Training provider inventory. So, a complete inventory of RTI capable providers in your priority sectors. So those could be community colleges, it could be high schools, it could be private training providers. Sector strategy refinement. So we're going to expand the detail to include labor market information analysis. You can use TPM back mapping, the work-based learning to RAP conversion plan. So we're really going to refine the sector strategy in that first quarter. And then also a regional referral and handoff process for employer engagement. Right now, we don't have, there's at least from a state level, we don't have a documented, this is how it's going to be the handoff process when you're working with your different partners. But we want to know that you're working in your region with multiple partners and you all have some kind of agreement of how it's going to work so you're not all inundating the same employer over and over, but you have some kind of handoff process and you're bringing the right people in at the right time. And that your partners, perhaps they just know to talk about apprenticeship, and if the employer is interested, they don't know anything else, but they know how to hand it off to you. And this is what I was talking about, how we're going to do this together. So we put it in in the notice that we said these are mandatory TA sessions, but it's actually partner sessions. I think here we really want to stress that we want to collaborate here. We don't know, we don't have all of the answers, and we've got to build this ecosystem and build this together. So we really want the TA sessions to actually move more to evolve into really partner meetings. We really want you to come in and share your ideas, share problem solving together, how we work this out together, how we should be thinking about this from the state and local perspective. So we really invite you to the table. And so we're going to have sessions, some working sessions in July, August, and September, so that we can get to these deliverables together. So you won't be on your own. We know that what's happening with workforce development and apprenticeship expansion happens at the local level. So we really need you to be at the table and really be our partner. So I just can't stress enough how this is more of a collaborative approach, that we need you to figure out how we're going to do this and do better for the state of Illinois. So your experience and expertise within your region is valuable and needed here at these meetings. We haven't set the dates. We'll send those to you. Now, application submission is the same as always. It's going to be submitted to this email address. Do not just send it to Chase. It's got to go to this email address. Applications must be received by May 22nd to be considered for funding commitment before June 30th. I note that this deadline has been established to support the state of Illinois' federal funding application. So our application is due to, I think, the USDOL on May 23rd. So we just want to make sure we're aligning things as well. So you'll notice that we've put this notice out there, and we're starting the process before we've even actually received the funds ourselves. But that's what's been said to be allocated to the state of Illinois, and we anticipate that we will get those funds. The review, so we're looking at capacity and performance. Previous performance is 40%, quality 40%, budget and reasonable cost is 10%, geographic distribution of awards 10%. DCO will review applications on a first come, first served basis until all available funds have been committed. And now this time is for Q&A. So now's your time to ask questions if you have any.
And you're all free to unmute at this point if you would like.
And I know the big ones you've already answered, John, so.
Hi, it's Amy from LWIA 7. Just, I understand it's 10% that we are budgeting of our total allocation. But for youth, don't we have to make 20%? So I'm a little confused by that, because 20% supposed to be of our youth funds are paid work experience. Where does that count in it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, and I think that's something we'll probably clarify as we dig into this more. We probably should have been more specific on the, kind of the setting the 10% as a starting point. Probably more appropriate for adult and dislocated worker. Right. But for sure, I mean, I think even within youth, right? I mean, some areas below that 20%. Blow that up, much higher than that 20%. And so that's going to be considered. We're going to consider the plan. That's why it's like a planning process to say, okay, well, what's reasonable to have a full work-based learning strategy and a commitment to that, to say, okay, from year over year, it's not just, oh, did we hit the threshold? This is a commitment, and we want this to be a commitment all the way through, and we're tracking some reasonable goals and benchmarks. And it's not just to track it for tracking's sake, right? There may be other data
Right.
points that are more appropriate for all of this, but that's kind of where we landed. Quite honestly, as we look at it, I think as I alluded to, like that 10% is a super low bar.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, no, I'm,
based even on the, I was just, like I said, like statewide average, like we've wobbled around that 10%, just looking at OJTs and internships alone, right? So depending on how you cut up the expenditure data, we're probably over that statewide, but I know we're not there at each individual local area level. And so that's part of why we wanted to set that out as a, kind of a minimum standard, because we know a lot of the competing, there's a lot of competing ways that we have to meet benchmarks. And we know that there can be concerns around that, but really the point is not to get I wouldn't over focus on the 10%, not saying you are, but you see that number and you're like, okay, well, how are we going to do that? It's really about the commitment to that consistent level of work-based learning opportunities, and how we integrate and track that, just so we're as a system, um, we're hearing what the policies are making are saying, both at the national and local level, around the importance of earn and
good.
learn. And
Yeah.
we all, for the been around a while, we've been talking about this for forever, right? And this is just like kind of the next progression. And again, it's not about, at the end of the day, we know that it's not getting a $300,000 or $250,000 apprenticeship grant isn't going to be, isn't, shouldn't be the reason you do this. It should be about, hey, this really fits with where our area and region wants to go with our priorities. And so our hope is that, as Jennifer mentioned, like, it's not about, well, this is RTA and we're going to show you how to do it's no, it's how do we build the infrastructure, regionally, locally together, and how can we help, and are there other resources that we can figure out how to support you all with.
I got it. I was just doing
Yeah.
some quick math and I was like, wait a
Yeah,
second.
no, you're good. I appreciate. No, I was gonna, it's like, not to say, like, when they have those sometimes they have talk shows where they have like a plant in the audience. I appreciate, not knowing you, but I appreciate the question, because I had hoped someone would ask that. So thank you.
Thanks, John.
Any other questions? John, this is the only plant I could find as an emoji.
Oh,
right
thank
now.
you.
So,
Yes,
there we go.
there you go.
Well, we look forward to seeing your applications.
Yep.
And again, we're all in this together. This is really a signal from DOL that they're a state system alignment. And they put in more requirements than they have ever in the past. And so, yeah, we just appreciate you all being partners with us in this.
Yep.
Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You're going to get sent, the landing page and the recording and the PowerPoint and all of that. And yeah, feel free again to reach. It's not a competitive application. So all areas are eligible. So please send them in.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.